Hey there! Today we continue our journey into the world of video pinball. First on our list is a very interesting one. Caveman from Gottlieb came out in May 1982. At first glance it looks like a standard pinball table, until you notice a joystick coming out the front and that TV screen way in the back. Let's try this one out. The table you'll find right away is rather sparse. Not just a lot to aim for here. Got a few targets, bumpers, and a couple of Vera targets in the top corners. Those last ones can affect the game. That second set of flippers ain't doing much either to add spice. All paths are going to lead you to those locks to play the video game, whether it's the bumpers or dropping back down from the corners. You'll notice this one is sort of the inverse of Baby Pac-Man, which we covered last episode, and beat it to market by a few months. While Pac-Man is primarily a video game with pinball as the bonus round, Caveman is a pinball table first and a video game second. Or at least I believe that was their intention. And once you enter the game portion in Caveman, you'll find it has a lot of similarities. It's a maze game where you need to defeat roaming enemies, brontosauruses in this case. But unlike Pac-Man, you don't need any power up to clobber them. Just walk right up to them. Instead, the twist is they become T-Rexes after being killed and will hunt you down instead. Unfortunately, it carries a bad over as well from Baby Pac-Man. The AI is way turned up. The Tyrannosauruses hunt you down extremely fast, and when they multiply a number, will cut you right off. There is a bit of a trick to this, however. When you bonk the dinos, they stay down for a few beats. This gives you the chance to chase down the others, and if you can manage that, it's so much easier because if you take out all the brontosauruses, they become triceratops, which you can then kill again. After that, it repeats with a different color scheme and faster speed. The behavior of the dinos also appears to change, some rounds even seeming to become easier. You can exit out the top or bottom of the maze if you're having too much trouble, because if you die in the game, you die in real life. Or the table tilts and your ball is lost anyhow. So it's a safe option. Yet upon re-entering with more than one TX around is a struggle. Just look at them swarming right outside. Waiting inside can give you a big advantage though, even without the T-Rexes. The AI can be easily manipulated. Hanging out inside the start area and being patient makes the dinos group up into a corner usually, with maybe a single straggler elsewhere. This gives you the perfect chance to swoop down and take them all out in one go. Since they all are congregated right beside you, just turn around and take them out again, rinse and repeat. You can score far more inside this game than on the actual pinball table, so there's little reason to exit even with the possibility of getting some bonus points by changing the brontosauruses to petrodactyls. Just look at all these bonuses from playing the game for a minute. So many. You can also earn balls by collecting glowing orbs inside the maze. Extremely rare, however. It's just skewed way too far in favor of the game rather than the pinball. Baby Pac-Man had a much better harmony in the way they work together, although the game portion has huge issues. In a Playmeter equipment poll published in their May 15th issue, which Caveman made the cover of, Caveman earned above average ratings with $225 in its first week. That's almost as much as the Donkey Kong video game, and more than the top-performing pinball machine, Hyperball. Marshall Carras, Gottlieb's vice president, stated, "Judging from the test results we've received so far, they seem to be attracting players from both of the established formats. Caveman is drawing pinball players as we expected, but it's also attracting previously video-only players, and the results are showing up in the cash box." In the equipment polls, it dropped to $182 June 1st, and hovered around being the number 1 or 2 earning pinball game, till December where it dropped to 3, and seemed to fade away from there. It seems to have performed as well as other top tables that appeared on the list in those months. Upkeep appears to be the common issue researching these hybrid games online. You had both the pinball parts and the video boards to keep going. It very well could have made it unprofitable to have around even with the quarters it brought in. I do like this game and recommend giving it a try. It's not something you'd come back to over and over, but it's unique and has its own spin even with the similarities. It's also on the easier side with the tricks, which could be good or bad depending on your taste. You can play it in visual pinball. The recreation I've been showing off here is made by Darth Marnio, so thanks to them for letting us experience this piece of gaming history today. In 1982 came Pinball for the ZX81, a machine with interesting history. It was a predecessor to the ZX Spectrum, and was the first computer to cost under £100. A PC for the everyman. Americans might know it as a Timex Sinclair 1000. I'll refrain from getting too deep into the history as I might make a video dedicated on it. Let's boot this thing up, which we're going to play on the sweet Atari monitor. Did you know they made monitors? What the? Oh, you move the entire bottom. Weird. The ball just bounces around hitting what I guess is basically bumpers. Look, I know it's a budget computer, but I'm sure it can do better than this. This is almost as bad as Pet Ball. There's also a Pinball 2. Let's try that out. I can't find any info on this game, so no clue on the year. Alright, looks like Pinball at least. Got a launcher, got flippers, maybe even some spinners up there made out of asterisks. Wait, what? What happened? The ball is completely out of control. What am I supposed to do? I thought I was running too fast at first, but no. The other gameplay I found of this was the same. What's going on now? The ball will just bounce back and forth forever if you hold the flipper up. What the hell, man? You know what I think the issue is? It has a dedicated bounce depending on the exact point it collides with. I believe that's the case because it hits the left flipper, it goes right into the right drain every time without failure. Most likely this little computer just couldn't do any sort of simulated physics. But it does have other interesting games on it. Some new ones even released to this day. Let me know if you'd like a video exploring them in the comments. Next, let's boot up our Apple II for Zero Gravity Pinball, created by Bill Budge of Avant-Garde Creations, and also released in 1982. It seems to have gone by the name Lunar Pinball as well. This is an odd one. I almost didn't include it because it's very unlike normal pinball, but it's interesting enough to include even if it's an overly complex mess. The entire game starts out with 18 pages of instructions. 18! Not like his particularly big font either. In the end, half of this wasn't even relevant. I'm the kind of guy who doesn't mind the light world building and techno-blabble. But come on, bro. The basic concept is your ball is in zero gravity space, pinging around the area. If your ball escapes out the top, bottom, or sides, you lose it. The top and bottom areas you can knock the ball back by putting up a force field by pushing either space for the bottom or any other key for the top. Those flippers on the sides are far more tricky. You select a flipper with a spinner controller. It's officially called a paddle controller. Select your flipper using the spinner and can knock back the ball by pushing the button. Pretty complicated, huh? And it's far from intuitive. The flipper will only work when the ball is close, otherwise it does nothing. The instructions even say as much. It can really throw off your timing due to this. Push the button a microsecond too early, and the flipper won't flip, the ball is gone. Even selecting the flipper you want is difficult enough anyway. Forget about playing in higher difficulties. These controls weren't meant for quick reactions. There's also talk in the instructions of sometimes flippers will change, and the hole in the middle will become a black hole. I don't know, man. None of that even happened while playing. The idea behind this game is really interesting, however, and I'd love to see someone take the concept for a modern game. It's really unlike anything else I've played. It's an example of great idea, bad execution. Keep it simple. Bill Budge only had a couple more credits to his name, with the most intriguing being his last in '87. A model railroad construction program called Run Your Own Train also on the Apple II. In 1983 came Bumper Bash from Serious Software for the Atari 2600. What you say we play this Atari game on the Atari monitor? This is actually a fun game. Physics, while slippery, are shockingly good. It bounces around in a rather convincing way, something like Acorn Software's Pinball for the TRS-80, but even better. Not to say it's without problems. Aiming your shots on the small flippers isn't great, but you can cradle it. It also uses the paddle controllers, which works excellent in each hand. You get 5 balls, and it's got plenty to aim for. The top rollovers let you spell ace when you pass over them, and doing so will activate some kickers on the side drains. Doing it a second time will net you an extra ball. The drop targets will activate bonus points on the bumpers. Only the top targets, not the lower left ones. These lower ones do nothing special, it seems. The spinner in the center will change the number, which then changes the value of the targets, and finally the slingshots will change which set of targets gives the extra points. In every aspect, it's far more like pinball than Atari's own video pinball for the system. In a way, I do kinda prefer that one though. It's quirky in a good way, but still this one is impressive. A lot packed into this little 2600 game. I for sure recommend giving it a try. Do others? I couldn't find any contemporary reviews from the day, but I did find an interesting specimen. Classic Gamer Magazine's fall 1999 issue gave it a review. They give it plenty of praise and describe the features, but end with, Bumper Bash could have been a better game had the programmers put a little more thought into the physics of the ball. It bounces around erratically at times, and does not behave properly when you hit it with the flippers. making your shots a little tougher than they need to be. Other than that, the game is a blast to play, and rate it with an 8 out of 10. Just for a little perspective, at the time that magazine reviewed the game, it was only 16 years old. At the time of this review, 2024, that magazine's review itself is 24 years old. Wowee. Lost World Pinball from Tandy Corp themselves came out in 1983 for the TRS-80 MC-10, a somewhat obscure budget computer that was part of the larger TRS-80 line. This game required the 16 kilobyte RAM expansion you can see here. Now then, let's just hit play. The first thing you'll notice is it's dinosaur themed, named after the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle book of the same title, The Lost World. I am a fan of Doyle, and I do like dinosaurs, so the theme is cool. Unfortunately, that's where my praise ends. This game is a snorefest. The ball moves so slow. Painfully slow. Here's a clip of me just letting the ball go through because it took forever to come down, and I was zoned out thinking about other stuff. There is a table goal to be had here. The mission is to make the volcano erupt, and to do that, you need to hit the 4 orange targets up top to extend the dinosaur's tongue and catch the fly. Thing is, you need to hit exactly those targets, 12 times in a single ball. The other orange areas don't count. Doing this is pure luck mixed with a bunch of patience. You really have no control over the ball, no nudge, and the flippers don't work right. They are weak and often throw the ball backwards into the walls. Needless to say, I didn't end up achieving that goal. I can't recommend this one. Pinball Construction Set was released in November 1982 for the Apple II, a particularly legendary game for its day, and comes from the great Bill Budge, who we discussed some last episode. Hey look, this copy is cracked by the cat. Neat. The game is true to its name because you're thrown right into constructing a table. No pre-made tables at all, at least at first glance. The manual says you type demo 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 to play the preloaded tables. Guess we'll try that first. Hold up. How do I play it? There's no button to play the table. Is it piracy protection? Is the cracker just screwing with us? Never trust a cat. Okay then, let's try this legit copy. Electronic Arts first published their games in these cool record-style sleeves because they thought it conveyed a more artistic feeling, because that's what they were publishing. Art, how the mighty get corrupted. Now that we got a proper floppy, let's try the demo tables. They are a bit of fun, nothing outstanding, and they succeed in showing off the various features you can use to build. My favorite is Demo 5 called Astro Blast. It just functions the best with the game's mechanics. The flippers feel a bit weak. They move slow and it takes getting used to. However, the physics themselves work well. The ball collides with surfaces and flings off the bumpers in a convincing manner. Like its predecessor Raster Blaster, the ball can tend to phase right through a flipper, and that happens a lot more due to the nature of having so many different kinds of tables of varying shapes and sizes. A big missing feature is there's no nudge, but not a lot of these early games had it, and the nudge in Raster Blaster wasn't very useful. It happened multiple times to me on these demo tables even. I don't think they were play tested much because there are areas that if it goes into, it ain't getting out no matter what. The most egregious one being on Demo 4's table, Silly Master Blaster. If it heads into the top left area, which it will since the table is built around it, the ball is bouncing forever. The wall is too tall, folks. But this is Pinball Construction Set after all, so why not try and fix it? Let's just try and shrink that green wall down. There we go, much better. Reading the manual, Bill mentions tables having issues for players to fix by using the tools on offer. I was surprised to see this was in fact his intention. Brilliant, honestly, but some reviewers didn't take notice. Amstrad Computer User's December 1986 issue, for example. You've got to try to get the play balance right and avoid building cul-de-sacs that trap the ball. This latter part is particularly difficult. As a demo game show, I found several of the authors didn't seem to have edited out. It was a gamble including that, I guess. These tools run deep. The possibilities impressed me a ton. Beyond the expected like flippers and bumpers, you can create completely custom shapes with a polygon tool to make your table. You can drag the corners to freely make any shape you want. If you want to get really custom, you use the scissors to cut away a point, and the hammer can add a new one. It's really similar to working in Adobe Illustrator. Certainly way ahead of its time. The only thing you could really argue is missing is the ability to rotate pieces, but that would have caused even more physics issues, I'm sure. I got lost right away for a good hour just trying things out and slowly working my way towards this table design, inspired by some of Gottlieb's early electromechanical tables. There's two features I tend to love: a secondary area to play in, and a way to return to the plunger. I wanted to see if I could incorporate these into the design. Creating the polygons for the return entrance to the plunger was easy, as was adjusting the overall shape of the table. From there on out, it's amazingly intuitive. I figured out most everything with nary a glance at the manual. It really is as simple as dragging and dropping the pieces. It gets out of the way and lets you loose to create your pinball dreams. It's very easy to manually test how each part will react. Drag it in, drop a ball above, and hit the test button. You'll instantly get a single ball to try out your creation. You can even adjust the physics of the table with simple sliders. Setting the gravity just a bit lower made my table play far better. And yes, you slide up to lower the gravity. You can also adjust the general speed of the ball. Kick adjusts the bumper strength, and finally elasticity changes how the ball reacts to the flippers and table surfaces. Hell, it even has multi-ball. Just place a holder on the table and when it fills up, your balls come out. I noticed over time that you really need to close up any sort of small gaps. The ball is small and gets stuck in them. Fine adjustment can be a bit difficult, but you will adapt. It used the joystick and not the mouse. The mouse did work in Apple Win actually, but was crazy sensitive. The joystick does seem to be the intended way, since it's the one mentioned in the manual. Now when you've got your pieces set up, it's time to get a little more advanced to go under the hood. Clicking the AND gate icon so you can wire up some pieces for bonus conditions. It's still easier than it looks at first glance. Just select the gate, then grab the screwdriver, and click on the parts you want to link, like hooking up the drop targets to the spinners. This makes it so you need to drop all the targets and touch the spinners for a big bonus multiplier. Removing a wire, you just use the clippers. You can also, of course, adjust the standard scoring of any single part. This does bring us to another negative of the game. The way scores work is just bizarre. Your normal gameplay scoring is very low numbers between 10 and 1500, but bonuses go from 1000 to 100,000. I'm not sure you can set up any kind of proper balanced scoring system in this. It doesn't bother me at all, but high score chasers certainly might be. After that, all that's left to do is the finishing touches. In addition to using the paintbrush to color all the parts, pixel artists will be glad to know there is a full-on painting mode. Select the paintbrush and then the magnifying glass, and select the area to zoom into. In the bottom right is where you can paint in that squared off area. The table shows the results in real time. I've seen people state they wish they could paint directly on the surface without the magnifying glass, but I really don't think most would like that. It'd be too small to properly control the individual pixels, and a single pixel out of place makes a huge difference. It works quite well once you get used to it anyway. It even has grids you can turn on for finer control. Budge, in an interview with Dadgum.com's Halcyon Days, spoke about creating these extra customization programs.
I was exposed to GUIs at Apple, and I had the pinball simulation from Raster Blaster. I saw that it would be a small step to do a construction set. This was the kind of program I liked, since there was no game to write. But it was a lot of work, since I had to implement file saving, a mini sound editor, and a mini paint program.
After those touches, the table is finished. Simple as I'm sure many first tables are. Not perfect, but I'm quite happy with how it plays. You can save your game to a floppy disk when finished to play later and share with others. Even cooler, you can save a table as its own executable. I'll be sharing this table in the description. You can load the virtual floppy right up in an emulator like AppleWin and play. No ROM needed. You just add the spin'em.dsk file and type brun space spin'em. Wait for it to load. To start the game, hit enter on the keyboard. You'll need a controller, Xbox or whatever works. Control stick up and down adjust plunger power, and A and B work the flippers and plunger. You can find tons of other people's tables around the internet on shareware and abandonware sites, even places like archive.org. This was self-published at first by Bill Budge's own company, Budge Co. But in 1983, Electronic Arts founder Trip Hawkins took notice of Pinball Construction Set and offered to become their publisher. Budge took them up on the offer as he found the publishing business too overwhelming. This led to the game getting ported to a number of platforms and getting wider distribution in general. Those were the Commodore 64, Atari 8-bit, Macintosh, and as a booter disk for PC. An interesting port, at least to me, was in making its way to Japan on the PC-98 and PC-88, published by Comptic. As I noted in my Sonic 1 Genesis video, pinball never really caught on over there. All these versions appear to play the same, with their usual visual quirks being the only real difference. The Macintosh edition notably lets you import full drawings from Mac Paint. allowing people to create very elegant and abstract tables. Wait a second. So the EA edition was different. The first one Budge self-published just didn't have a way to play a full game from the menus. It wasn't the cat's fault after all.
For the record, I took that personally.
Sorry to any cats out there. You had to export the executable and run the file name manually to play even the demo tables. So anyway, you can tell I love it. But how was PCS received in the day? Let's find out. Family Computing Magazine's October 1983 issue reviewed both the Apple II and Atari 8-bit versions. They highlighted how easy the interface was to use. It's like an electronic erector set, only easier to use and a lot more fun. Pinball playtesters of all ages often work together to improve upon various designs. In particular, youngsters spent many quiet hours of playtime creating magnificent game boards that they displayed with pride. Pinball is one of the year's best. Watch Bill Budge for future contributions to the field. The UK's Zap 64's September 1985 issue covered the Commodore 64 edition. It also has a great layout and cool art on the pages. A few choice quotes are, "This is a really brilliant utility, and using it is dead easy, even for a non-programmer like me. I didn't want to put it down until I'd finished a table," and that, "PCS is a wonderful utility that shouldn't be overlooked by any pinball fan." Most notably, the main review finished up noting that they are looking for certain tables to take photos of and remake them on the Commodore. It really shows off how much this game inspired people to create, and just how far the tools can be pushed. They scored the game great in all categories, with an overall of 94%. Also, in October '83, Video Magazine's famous Arcade Alley column took a look at the Atari 8-bit version. They praised the game, yes, but there's another very intriguing statement. One company has published a couple of discs containing games produced with PCS. What were those games? I'm not exactly sure, but there was a lot of individuals making and selling discs back then. However, I did find what I believe is one example. In 1983, from John Jacchio and Vince Carahali, came Fireware Pinball for the Apple II. This is a collection of 3 tables, and as soon as you get past the title screen, that plays an extremely sharp and painful version of the Dracula theme. It's obvious it was made with Construction Set. I wish I could say it's a fun time, but they aren't very enjoyable to play. The first 2, Roly Poly and The Nightmare, are full of traps that just make your ball fall right out of play. I rarely could keep it in for more than a few seconds. The third table, The Express, would freeze every time it's selected. But I can praise the creativity and visual design put into them. The extra areas are neat if you can actually get to them, and I like the extra flippers. The painted faces and demons are cool too. Many other releases are probably lost media now, but man, it shows how this game inspired people to become developers. John went on to become a programmer, working on games like Robotron 64 and Hercules: The Legendary Journeys. The fact that Sony put dreams out to pasture really is a travesty. Someone save that and get it to PC to inspire the next generation. Pinball Construction Set's legacy lived on for a long time, being named the 50th best PC game of all time by Computer Gaming World's November 1996 special issue. Budge was not much of a fan of video games or games at all. He even described playing pinball for months while developing PCS as sheer torture. Dude just did not like game design. He would go on to other projects and have gaps in his gaming resume. I would return off and on throughout the next couple decades, doing programming and engineering on games like Uncharted, Killzone, and the MLB games. Within this pinball series, we will see him one more time on the Sega Genesis. But we'll get there when we get there. Hey there, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, drop a like, and leave a comment. It really helps. I ended up splitting this into 2 parts, as I'm sure we all can agree, Pinball Construction Set deserved to be a headliner game. Plus, this episode would have gotten extremely long. Next video will be the sequel to this, where we reach NES Pinball. Also, Granny and the Gators will be covered in that. It's in production, so it won't take as long as this one did to come out. I'm off to work on that. So, see you real soon.